Okay, so welcome to the 4M seminar series. For those of you joining us for the first time, 4M stands for the Menarche, Menstruation, Menopause and Mental Health Research Consortium. And we are a network of researchers working at the intersection of menstrual and mental health. This is the 5th seminar in our series. If you'd like to see the earlier seminars, then you could do that on our YouTube page, which is linked to from our website, which is 4mhealth.uk. So one of the founding values of 4M is around support for early career researchers, including PhD students. Yeah, it's such an important area of research, so we really need to support researchers to enter the field and then sustain their careers within it. So I'm really delighted today to welcome Emmanuel Anongeba Anaba to speak to us. Emmanuel is a final year PhD candidate in public health at the University of Ghana, where he previously worked as a graduate research assistant. He's already contributed to over 30 peer-reviewed research articles, and today he's going to talk to us about some research that he's conducted around factors contributing to taking time off schoolwork and social activities during menstruation in women from Ghana. And he's also going to talk to us a little about his PhD work as well. If you have any questions during the seminar, then please put them in the chat. We should have time at the end to go through them. I should say that Emmanuel's internet connection is a little bit unstable, so he's not going to have his camera on, and we may have a bit of a delay, but we're keeping our fingers crossed it's all going to be okay. So thank you very much, Emmanuel. I'll pass over to you now.
Thank you very much for having me here. So I want to start by saying that Sunday was the World Menstrual Hygiene Day, and I was happy to see the kind of publicity it received on social media and on local media as well in Ghana. So today I want to talk about a very interesting topic titled Correlate of Absenteeism at Work, School and Social Activities During Menstruation, Evidence from the 2017-2018 Ghana Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey. As already introduced, I'm a final year PhD student at the University of Ghana. So I will take you through the background of the presentation. I also talk about the objectives of the study, the methods, the results, as well as the discussion, and conclude. I also spend some few minutes talking about my PhD research that looks at a cluster randomized control trial in rural Ghana. So I must say that this presentation or this article has already been published in PLOS ONE, and the citation has been provided for anybody who wants to read the full article. So menstruation is a normal biological process, as we all know. So globally, about 1.8 billion women, girls, non-binary persons, and transgender menstruate every month. And during menstruation, women and girls need access to menstrual hygiene facilities to be able to manage menstruation confidently and with dignity. And some of these materials or facilities include access to clean water, access to safe absorbent or menstrual materials, as well as soap. They also need privacy or a place to change, and disposable facilities to safely dispose used menstrual materials. Unfortunately, access to basic facilities, like as I've mentioned, is a challenge in most parts of the world, especially in low and middle income countries. And globally, over 500 million menstruators lack access to these facilities. And these challenges actually contribute a lot. It affects girls and women, their education. As a study in Niger and Burkina Faso actually show that 11% and 90% of women miss work due to menstruation. Menstruation also affects women empowerment as well as their inclusion in education, which are linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 3 talk about health for all. Goal 4 talk about inclusion in quality education. 5 talks about gender equality. And 6 talks about clean sanitation. And menstruation actually is linked to all these goals. So lack of access to menstrual hygiene facilities can actually pose a threat to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, there's a need for attention, or we need to look at it in many directions, including research. So in Ghana, close to 27 and 95% of girls sometimes miss school due to menstruation, but we know little about menstruation-related absenteeism among women of reproductive age. The existing studies look at schoolgirls or girls in school and why they miss school during menstruation, but we know little about the magnitude of menstruation-related absenteeism among women of reproductive age. Now, these findings will be relevant to stakeholders and can help inform policy and programs in Ghana. The objective of this study is to assess the prevalence of menstruation-related absenteeism. So we are looking at absenteeism at work, school, and social activities among women aged 15 to 49 years. And the next objective is to look at the factors associated with this absenteeism. I want to spend time to talk about the data source and how we came about with the data for the analysis. Actually, this study is a secondary data analysis of the 2017-18 Ghana Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, popularly known as the MIX. So MIX is similar to the DHS. They also collect data from households and they look at health indicators, including menstrual hygiene. So we use data from the recent mix that was conducted in Ghana. And we know that Ghana is located in West Africa and has a population close to 31 million people. So the mix actually sampled 12,886 households. And out of that, 14,374 women were interviewed for the survey. So the outcome of interest has to do with menstruation-related absenteeism at work, school, and social activities. So what the survey did was that they asked a single question to assess absenteeism. And the question was, due to your last menstruation, were there any social activities, school or work days that you did not attend? So basically it combines social activities, school and work absenteeism. And it was coded as yes, means that the person or the respondent missed any of these three, and no indicating that the person did not miss. So I will look at independent variables like access to privacy. You know, as I mentioned earlier, privacy is very important when it comes to menstrual hygiene management. We also look at access to menstrual materials, as well as the type of menstrual material that the respondents were using. We also look at how each of the respondents, their level of education, and other socio-demographic factors actually influence absenteeism during menstruation. So we did descriptive analysis. We also look at use chi-square to look at association between variables. And we did a binary logistic regression, which is a multi-variable logistic regression to look at the significant predictors or factors associated with menstruation-related absenteeism. So we look at the odd ratios. We look at odd ratios, and we also look at the report at a 95 confidence interval. Before the analysis, we actually adjusted for sample weight. You know, when you are dealing with the secondary data, you need to adjust for sample weight, kind of normalize the data before you proceed with the analysis. So now I want to talk about the results of the study. It was found that 41% of the respondents actually had junior high education. So in junior high education, you can look at grade 7 to grade 9. In Ghana, we call them junior high schools. And 16% of the respondents were actually within the poorest wealth index or quintile. Majority of them were married or they were in union, and more than half of the respondents were actually living in rural communities or areas. With regards to access to menstrual hygiene facilities, it was found that 98% of the respondents were actually using menstrual materials during their last menstruation. 13% of them use reusable materials, such as reusable clothes, menstrual cup, and other reusable materials for monthly menstruation. And 94% had access to privacy at home to actually change their menstrual materials. In terms of absenteeism, 19% of the respondents actually missed work, school, or social activities during menstruation. And this is close to about 1 in 5 women who miss work or school due to menstruation. It was also found that 35% of the women did not use menstrual materials, 35% of the women who did not use any form of menstrual material actually missed work or school or social activities. And 1 in 5 women actually, 1 in 5 women who use reusable materials also missed work or school. 1 in 5 women in rural areas also missed work or school. And finally, 1 in 5 young women, like women between the ages of 15 and 24 years, also missed work or school due to menstruation. We move further to do regression analysis. So we first of all look at the crude analysis. At the crude level, we did not adjust for any variable. We look at the single variable versus the outcome. And we found that young women were more likely to miss school or work due to menstruation compared to older women. And when we also compared the married versus unmarried, we found that women who were never married were also more likely to miss. They were about 1.838 times to miss compared to the married women. We also realized that women in the Ashanti region were also more likely to actually miss compared to women in the other regions. I must say there's a typo there. So women in that particular region were more likely to miss due to menstruation. And nulliparous women, which refers to women who had never given birth, were also more likely to miss compared to women who had given birth. We move further to look at adjusted analysis by controlling for other variables, and we found that women who did not use reusable materials were 33% less likely to miss work or school due to menstruation. So in other words, women who use disposable materials were less likely to actually miss school or work due to menstruation. It was also realized that women who had access to privacy at home were also more likely to miss, which is unexpected finding. And women in the second wealth index also had increased odds of missing work or school due to menstruation, which is another unexpected finding, I must say. Women in the Ashanti region had higher odds of missing work or school activities due to menstruation. So now I want to talk about the discussion and the implications of these findings and whether there's a need for policy or some interventions to be put in place. So as I mentioned earlier, about 1 in 5 women miss work or school due to menstruation. And these findings have actually been confirmed by similar studies in Burkina Faso, as well as Nigeria. However, this particular study I'm referring to look at only work-related absenteeism, but did not combine the three. And women who miss work or school or social activities could be due to several reasons, such as menstrual pain, such as restrictions like menstrual taboos. In some parts of Ghana, women who menstruate are not allowed to kind of participate in certain domestic or religious activities. It could also be due to lack of access to menstrual hygiene facilities. As Boatia Dom actually found that girls who lack access to menstrual hygiene materials were more likely to miss school in northern Ghana. So what could be explaining, what are the implications of these findings? What it means is that if women and girls lack access to menstrual hygiene facilities and they do not attend work or go to or miss social activities, it contributes to affecting their academic work, which means that they will not have that opportunity to pursue higher academic opportunities. And when you miss school, it also affects your academic performance. And it also has economic implications. For example, women who miss work will affect their productivity and other things like that. So this has implications for women empowerment as well as their health and education. You know that the use of unsafe materials is linked to infections as well. The use of disposable absorbent reduce the odds of missing work or school due to menstruation. So these findings actually has been confirmed by Kumbini, who did a study in the northern region and found that actually women prefer disposable sanitary pads because they were perceived to be comfortable and safe compared to reusable materials like clothes. This implies that increasing access to disposable sanitary pads could actually increase productivity and women empowerment because they will be engaged in economic activities, they will be in school and wouldn't mix. In Ghana, however, there is huge tax on disposable or commercial sanitary pads. Currently, there is 20% of import tax as well as 12.5% of value-added tax slapped on disposable sanitary pads or commercial sanitary pads. And there are over 15 taxes imposed on sanitary pads, including COVID-19 tax. So all these taxes amount to over 30%, which means that these materials will be quite expensive and women and girls may not be able to afford. And it means they have to go for unsafe materials, which can affect their participation in school and work as well. So the recommendation we are preferring is that policymakers have to consider removing taxes of sanitary products to make them affordable as well as accessible. Currently, there is serious advocacy for policymakers to have a look at the sanitary tax or sanitary pad tax and actually remove all those taxes to make it accessible and affordable. But later on, I will talk about whether such an intervention is effective or not, because my PhD actually looked at that. We also realized that the Ashanti region, women in those regions were more likely to absent And it could be due to the fact that the accounts believe that or perceive menstruation as a taboo, as confirmed by Ajekum 2022, who said that the accounts perceive menstruation as a verbal taboo. And these taboos could actually affect women participation in socioeconomic activities. There's also literature to show that girls in the Ashanti region were restricted or banned from crossing a particular river called River Ofin to access school. So because they believe that girls who menstruate are unclean, they are not pure to cross rivers to access education. And we know that imposing taboos or restrictions on women is a violation of their fundamental human rights. That means women will not be able to access education if they have to cross rivers to actually go to school, if they have to cross a river to go to work. Even there are some communities that women who menstruate are not allowed to visit galamsey, which is known as illegal mining pits, but they believe that the menstrual blood can actually affect their possibility of getting gold. And there's the need for interventions to reduce absenteeism. And we are suggesting that these interventions should actually prioritize young women as well as communities where menstruation is considered a taboo. There, we actually found two unexpected findings. And one is the fact that women in the second wealth index were more likely to miss work or school. And this is unexpected. Additionally, women who had access to privacy at home were also more likely to miss. So we are proposing that there's a need for further studies to actually explore reasons for absenteeism at work, because our study was purely a quantitative study and we couldn't explore the reasons behind the absenteeism. So we are suggesting that future studies can actually take it up and try to explore reasons for absenteeism to help explain why women in the second wealth index, as well as women with access to privacy, were more likely to miss work or school. So this particular study has some strengths and limitations. This is the maiden study in Ghana, to the best of our knowledge, that has actually looked at menstruation, the magnitude of menstruation-related absenteeism among women of reproductive age. And this is the study. We also analyze secondary data that is nationally representative, which means that these findings can be generalized to the target population as well. Unfortunately, or a limitation of this study is that, the survey actually combined three activities, which is work, school, and social activities. And we see this as problematic because you won't be able to distinguish between whether there are absenteeism, how many women absented from school, what proportion absented from work, what proportion absented from social activities. So we are suggesting that future surveys like the future multiple indicator cluster surveys should actually consider segregating menstruation-related absenteeism by looking at work absenteeism separately from school absenteeism from social activities. So we are saying that these findings should be interpreted with caution because this absenteeism looks at three activities. And finally, association does not mean causality or causation. So the fact that these factors were associated with absenteeism doesn't mean that these are the factors causing absenteeism. And we need to interpret the findings with caution as well. So in conclusion, a significant minority of women in Ghana actually miss work, school, and economic activities during menstruation. And menstruation absenteeism was actually associated with the type of absorbents used during menstruation, as well as the region that the person is residing in. So in the quest to reduce menstruation-related absenteeism, there's the need for stakeholders to actually, among other things, focus on increasing access to safe disposable absorbent, because we found that women who use disposable absorbent were less likely to miss work or school due to menstruation. So this is the end of the study, but I want to spend some few minutes to talk about my PhD thesis. So my PhD thesis actually is a randomized controlled trial which took place in the northern part of Ghana, precisely the Upper East region. We look at two districts, the Binduri and Pusika district, and we were looking at how absenteeism, how providing menstrual hygiene facilities will actually contribute to improving health outcomes as well as educational outcomes. So the first objective of the thesis was to explore barriers and facilitators to optimal menstrual hygiene practices among girls in junior high schools. So this was actually a formative study that we conducted to inform the intervention or the trial that we did. And the intervention comprised of multiple items. One was we subsidized the price of sanitary pads. So in the open market, the sanitary, the pad of the price was around 8 Ghana cedis, which is less than $1 or £1. But we subsidized it to 5 Ghana cedis, which is like 1/3 of a pound. Yeah. And we also provided period education as well as menstrual health booklets. We gave facilities like Veronica buckets, free pad for the school to keep in terms of, in case of emergency, unexpected menstruation at school, girls can have access to it. We also give dustbins as well as liquid soap for hand washing. Lastly, we embark on a sensitization program against period teasing by pasting posters in the classrooms to kind of educate students on the need to support girls during menstruation. So we were interested in three main outcomes. We are interested in how the intervention actually affects school absenteeism during menstruation, because both descriptive statistics and the formative studies show that girls actually miss school during menstruation. So we wanted to find out if the intervention was effective enough to actually reduce absenteeism and by what margin. We were also interested in how the intervention affects girls' engagement in school beyond not going to school. Girls who manage to go to school also have their concentration in class affected. Some even miss school hours, they go home before the closing time. Some of them don't even participate in physical activities or sports activities. So we're interested in how the intervention could actually help reduce all these things. And finally, infections, urogenital infections, which is also associated with poor menstrual hygiene practices. So we're interested in finding out whether the intervention was actually effective to be able to reduce the symptoms of infections among girls in junior high schools. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for coming.
Thanks very much, Emmanuel. Let me just unpin you. That was really, really fascinating. Thank you. So yeah, so anybody have any questions? Let me just remove the thing where I don't let you unmute yourself. Yeah, so just feel free to kind of unmute yourself and speak, or raise your hand, or put a message in the chat, and I'll read it out. While we're waiting for questions from other people, so I have one question. I think you're absolutely right that that if you could get data that was more kind of granular on those kind of separated elements of missing work, school, and social activities in particular, I think that would be really, really informative. I think that the data that you have is really useful, but as you say, the mechanisms might be quite different, I think, for missing social engagements, or the confounders, the things that kind of affect whether or not you miss social engagements might be different from those that affect whether or not you miss work. And I wondered whether that might explain some of the unexpected findings. And I also totally agree with your suggestion of having some qualitative work to follow this up, to really kind of drill down into why people are absent. One thing I wondered was, so when you were talking about implications or the policy implications of your findings, you said about supporting people or improving access to disposable absorbent materials. And I just wondered whether there might also be an argument for increasing or supporting people to use sustainable, reusable pads or menstrual cups, and what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, with regards to the unexpected findings, I must say that there's a need for further studies, but what I think is that perhaps absenteeism is not actually influenced by economic factors or like socioeconomic status, or it's not influenced by issues of privacy at home. It could be due to other factors. But it's also possible that that combination, that composite outcome, combining the three activities could actually also contribute to the unexpected findings. So in the future, if we have a data that kind of segregate, then we'll be able to explore further to find out. But on the issue of other sustainable sanitary product like the menstrual cup, actually my PhD study started with exploring the acceptability of the menstrual cup. So actually during the piloting stage of the trial, I distributed menstrual cup to adolescent girls, but I received a serious kind of rejection from the participants because there were a whole lot of concerns about the safety of the cup, or they felt that this can even contribute to infertility, can make their private part enlarged. There were a whole lot of perceptions, and some parents were not even ready for their daughters to use such products. So I must say in Ghana, when it comes to the use of injectable devices, people are so much concerned about it, and they may not be willing to use it, as I found some small evidence from my trial, my piloting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that you have that kind of extra information on that those contextual issues. So there are a couple of questions. Well, there's one question in the chat now. So from Isabel Ward, who works at the Office for National Statistics in the UK. So yeah, this is a question that I also wondered as you were speaking. So you found this, you found that women who weren't married, and also women that were nulliparous, so haven't previously had a pregnancy or a child, were more likely to miss school. And you also found, I think, that younger, or more likely to miss school or work. And I think you also found that younger women were more likely to miss school or work. And yeah, so the question is, were those associations with being unmarried and being and not having a previous child adjusted for age? And yeah, if so, do you have any thoughts about what could be driving that association?
Yeah, what I think is that in the analysis, we actually adjust them for age, we adjust them for marital status and the other ones. But what I have to say has to do with the fact that, those who are not married, or those who don't have a child, or sorry, have not given birth yet, I think they are more likely to be young girls, because in Ghana, we know that girls, the legal age of marriage is around 18 years. So if people are not married and they have never given birth, there's that possibility that they may be adolescent girls, which goes back to confirm the fact that young women were more likely to miss. And we know that young women, when it comes to issues of absenteeism at school, is quite common because they lack access to some menstrual hygiene facilities, even at the school level and even at the individual issues of inadequate knowledge or inadequate information and stuff like that contribute to absenteeism among young girls. So yes, those who are not giving birth before and those who were not married, they are more likely to be young women. Yeah, that's what I think I have to say. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, and then in your adjusted analysis, sorry, you might have said this, in your adjusted analysis, did you adjust for age, and did you find that those associations were persistent?
After adjusting, we discovered that the age wasn't a significant predictor in terms of absenteeism. Yeah.
Okay, great, interesting. Samantha just has some praise. So this is really interesting work, and so important to hear about menstrual health in different countries, which is, yeah, I would echo. So far in these seminars, we've mostly been thinking in a sort of UK context. So this is really interesting. And then Rebecca asks, what is the prevalence of teenage pregnancy? So some qualitative work that she's done indicates that girls or women who are pregnant regularly rarely menstruate, and so don't suffer the problems on a regular basis. And one person told her that they hadn't had a period for about 3 years. So yeah, so what's the kind of can you talk a bit about that kind of context in Ghana? So firstly, I guess prevalence of teenage pregnancy, and then also the recurrent pregnancies, the kind of rate of recurrent pregnancies, I guess, if you have information on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have some bit of information when it comes to the prevalence of teenage pregnancy. I don't have statistics, but teenage pregnancy, I must say, is on the rise in Ghana, especially with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. It actually recorded high figures in terms of teenage pregnancy. But regards to the repeated pregnancy, I don't have statistics on that. I don't know much about that area. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Interesting. Any other questions from anybody in the chat? My only other question was around so you mentioned the economic implications of sort of downstream of taking time off school and work, potentially having this kind of economic impact. And I wondered whether using the data set that you're using, the Ghana Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, if you also had data on the kind of income or occupation, that sort of thing for these participants.
Yes, the data actually look at the kind of work, like occupation, the kind of occupation the participants were engaging. Unfortunately, we did not include that in our analysis. But in terms of income, no, the data didn't include income of participants.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, you had a lot in there, so it's absolutely fine to have not done that. But I would, yeah, I guess some follow-on work might be to see whether these whether menstruation related absenteeism translates to kind of loss of, well, I suppose you couldn't do loss of earnings, but maybe there are some sort of economic outcomes that you could look at, including maybe occupation level as a kind of proxy for income or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, that might be an interesting thing to look at as a follow-on study.
You're right. I think in future studies, we may consider looking at that.
Great, yeah, and your RCT sounds super interesting. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing the results of that when it's available. If there aren't any more questions, oh, there is a question, great, from Kate. So she says, "Hi, Emmanuel, thank you very much for the presentation, very interesting. It's interesting to hear a bit about how girls and women felt about different products. You mentioned this in the response to a question. I was wondering if you came across any girls and women leading social action on menstruation."
Yeah, there are quite a lot of civil society organization in Ghana. And even this morning, I watched the news, and some civil society organization actually presented a petition to the Parliament of Ghana, pushing for the taxes on sanitary pads to be removed. There are also some NGOs that are also pushing so hard, intensifying the advocacy for the taxes to be removed. So I must say, yes, there are a lot of them. They are working so hard to ensure that women are fairly treated.
Great, that's great to hear. Perfect. Yeah, and Mahira says super interesting work. Thank you so much. And again, I'd echo that. Yeah, so if there aren't any more questions, then I will draw things to a close and say thank you so much, Emmanuel. As people have said in the chat, it's just really super interesting and well, really relevant to what 4M are doing, but also so nice to hear about things going on in different countries. And yeah, to everyone else, this will be uploaded to our YouTube this week. And yeah, our next 4M seminar will be in June, and that will be on menopause in the workplace, particularly around sort of hybrid working. And we'll be sending out an invite to that also later this week. So yeah, so thank you again, Emmanuel, so much, and thank you everyone for joining, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.